So at the end of the day, this claim, I find that inherently false and terribly flawed. The morality coming from religion is objective, because then you again have to have problem with which God to follow. I mean, why don't we go with Hindu model of morality, that cow is your mother? Hi, my name is Sultan. I am an author and an activist. A part of my activism is mainly about, I want to inspire other ex-Muslims to come out, because I think it's about time that more people come out, more people talk about it, easier it's going to be, because for a very long time we've lived in a bubble where we think that once you're a Muslim you can never come out of it, and this is the perfect system that we've been given, and there's no room for improvement. If we have any doubts, then we need improvement. The ideology, the religion itself, the way of life is just perfect, and there's no room for improvement in that. So as an activist, I think when other people would have been going through the same stage as I went through, they don't feel alone, and we're starting to see that. I would call it a silent revolution, where there's so many people are coming out, and there's so many people who are yet undecided to come out to the world or not. Because when people start coming out as an atheist, as a disbeliever, I think that's the time when it's just going to create open floodgates for everyone else. So as an activist, that is my primary goal, to inspire other people. I just recently gave a talk in London as well, where I spoke about the importance of activism, and how activists who are already activists, they need to inspire other people to come out. So I was born in Lahore, Pakistan, and my father at the time was working in Saudi Arabia, so I spent first 3.5-4 years of my life in Saudi Arabia, which I have no memory of other than some photos, and then moved back to Pakistan. I would say my family was moderately religious. They were firm in their belief, but they weren't. They weren't really fanatical about their religion. So as a normal kid, I learned I read the Quran in Arabic. I had no idea what was written in that. Grew up, learned how to pray by the age of 11, 12 or something, and started fasting about 13, 14 years of age. Never really had any doubts, because it was just a part of the family. Everyone around me prayed. Everyone around me read the Quran and taught that this is how we're supposed to be. I was growing up in the 90s, so that was also a big shift for families of middle-class families of the time. They were opening up to satellite TV, and they were opening up. Bollywood was a big part of our life, as most Pakistani families would have had. So we had some exposure to the Indian culture. From time to time, we'd watch some Western movies as well, Hollywood movies, not Western as in the Western movies. Probably would have seen them as well at some point. So I would say very moderately religious. So I mean, religion was a part of our life, but we weren't really governed by that. Now that I've seen how some other Muslim children grew up, especially in these Western countries, where they're totally cut off, where they could be living next to Johnny and Sally, but the identity aspect of being Muslim was so deeply ingrained or pushed into them that they felt themselves that they were different. Whereas I didn't have Johnny or Sally living next door. We had Abdullah, Muhammad living next door. So that aspect never came up. It was just taken for granted that we're Muslims. This is what we do, that's pretty much it. I went to a Christian school, which was considered, not because it was Christian, but it was just considered good in those days. So there were better schools than the government schools or the other private schools. So I had exposure to dealing with some other some Christians who used to be in our classrooms. So religion wasn't really that big part of our lives. We did just everything that was just supposed to be done. But later on, I see now that it's changed a bit. But my family wasn't really that. They were religious. I would still say they were religious. They were firm in their faith, but they weren't fanatical about it. See, in Pakistan, it's very funny from the rest of especially the Middle Eastern Islam. It's like we have our own sects. The called main ones are like Barelvi and Deobandi. I'm not sure if you guys would have heard of it. And then we have Wahhabis, which are kind of like Salafis, which we and Ahle Hadith, which that's what they're called. But my father's side, they used to call themselves Ahle Hadith, which is supposed to be a bit more literalist, which is supposed to be Wahhabis. But I didn't see that in my, I didn't see that kind of Salafism in my father's side. My mother's side was, which I later found out that my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, he probably followed Deobandi school of thought. But that never really filtered down to us. So we just thought that we were just Sunni Muslims. To us, the only thing that really mattered was either you're Sunni or a Shia, or worse, Ahmadi, which is the pejorative for that is Qadiani. But no Qadiani or Ahmadi would come out and say that we are Ahmadi or Qadianis, because that's like calling for your death sentence, literally. So you're either a Sunni or a Shia. So we were just Sunni Muslims. We didn't specifically belong to any particular sect like Deobandi or Barelvi or even Ahle Hadith. I remember my father casually dropped that in when I was almost recruited as a jihadi, which was just an accident. Nobody knew that could have happened. It's a separate story. We'll go in a different tangent otherwise. But at that time, I remember we were sitting amongst some guys there, and they said, my father said, oh yeah, we are Ahle Hadith. We are Wahhabis. So that's the time first time when I heard about it. But up until that point, I think I was 14 at that time. But up until that point, we were just Sunni Muslims. We prayed however everyone else around us prayed. The word Deobandi, Barelvi, Ahle Hadith, Wahhabi, these things were just totally alien to us. And I thought at that time that that is the Islam. But later on I discovered that how sectarian Pakistani society is, or even was at that time, where there were strong fault lines lied there between Deobandis and Barelvis, even though they're the branches of Hanafi school of thought, but still they despise each other so much that there's so much sectarian tension between them. So I would just say I was a Sunni Muslim, and beyond that we didn't really care much. Notice that some people put their hand a bit differently when they're praying, but that I just looked at the guy next to me and then I said, okay, well, I just put it just below my belly button. I think that's the right place to put my hand. When you're fasting, there's only one prayer to break the fast and to start the fast. Rest of that didn't really matter. Everything else, we believed that whatever is good, whatever we've been told by our elders or by smart people around us, that this is the right version of Islam. Prophet did this, Prophet did that. That's a good thing. He loved orphans. He was kind. That was it. So we never really went into too much detail, which now I think that is not only just me, especially pre-YouTube era. I say that all the time, that in the 90s, there was only one time before, because TV station would restart at 3 p.m. and then there'll be a morning transmission, and then in the afternoon there'll be a gap, and then 3 o'clock will start again. That's the only time when we would see a cleric who would read the Quran, some kids around and would read the Quran, and that would only be for 10 minutes. Other than that, we would never see a cleric or a Maulvi or anything about Islam. Then the dramas will start, cartoons will start. So Islam was very controlled in that time. But now there are YouTube channels, and everyone has a YouTube channel. Every favorite cleric, Deobandi, Barelvi, whichever one you want to listen to, you can subscribe to it. And now they're going in details. for example, I didn't even know. I was a practicing Muslim. I was praying. I was fasting. I was doing everything that I was supposed to do. But I didn't know that Aisha was only 9. I didn't know that Zainab was Prophet's adopted son's wife. So I didn't even know about sex slavery. I didn't know about any of those things when I was supposedly a Muslim. So all these things came much later. So I would say, again, very moderately religious, in name only, in worship, in rituals only, we were Muslims. And I still think that that's mostly the case. Right, so doubts, basically, there were a few questions. Like, I remember when I was very young, 9, 10 or something, I went to this place called Minar-e-Pakistan, the Tower of Pakistan, which is a monument where the resolution for Pakistan was passed in 1940. So it's a very nice place in Lahore. So I remember I went there, and the tower was the biggest thing I had ever seen. We didn't have any skyscrapers, probably still don't have any. And I was like, I came back and I asked my father, I said, was that Allah, Mia? Was that Allah? It was so big. This is the biggest thing I've ever seen. My father laughed and he said, no, your father is, God is even way bigger than that. I was like, and I'm imagining, this is me 8 or 9 years old. I'm thinking, what is this? How could be anything bigger than that? I remember asking my mother, who created everything, or Allah did, who created Allah? Well, I don't know, son, don't ask too many questions. And I've said that in my Why I Left Islam video, just like this, just in the passing. And a lot of people criticize us, oh, so he left Islam because his mother didn't know the answer. And I'm like, no, I didn't leave Islam at that point, but do you have any answers still? No one, philosophers and scientists, no one has been able to answer these questions. So don't try to, just shoot down the argument. But anyway, so these are the questions which I thought that, didn't ask them again, forget about them. At the back of your mind, I think they always stay there. But, so if you say that that's a doubt, I always used to get fascinated when I would look up in the night sky and I said, there's so many little twinkling little dots, what's happening around them? For example, people would tell me that, oh, these are also stars, when you would think like, well, if it's a star like sun, why are they white and not yellow? So these kind of little questions, and kids are quite curious about these kind of questions, which you later on learned that these are actually pretty big questions and they've been troubling people for thousands of years. But then you forget about that. You kind of get the sense that religion offers you very simplistic kind of the worldview, that what really happens, no, this is God is the designer of everything, he governs our lives, and we have to be good, we have to do these things, and everything is hunky-dory, everything's fine after that. So apart from these little troubling questions, you forget about them. I went on. I remember there was a phase in my life, because I always wanted to live, and I've asked other people as well, and I get mixed answers, that you want to live your life by a certain code. And you say, okay, well, if God wants me to behave in a certain manner, don't lie, don't cheat, don't, whatever the version of Islam that we are told. Obviously, when you go in details, then you find all these kind of problems. But on surface level, you try to do the right thing. You want to live your life by a code. And I was like, I remember there was a stage in my life from 15 to 16 or something. I was praying 5 times a day. I was doing extra prayers. I was reading the Quran in Arabic. Again, no idea what's written in there, but worshipping God as I'm supposed to be, and I'm being very serious about it. But then I think that was also a phase, and I kind of drifted out of that. Then I moved to Australia when I was 19 as a student. I did my degree there, and that's when I think I was working. I used to work at a petrol station when I was studying in a uni, and I picked up this newspaper, and there was this little opinion piece written by a Christian apologist, and he was trying to refute Richard Dawkins. I didn't know who Richard Dawkins was, so I was reading it, and I'm looking at how this guy is trying to give a rebuttal to Richard Dawkins' argument, whatever argument it was. But as I'm reading it from a religious person's point of view, and I'm thinking, whoever the other guy is, his question still makes more sense, even though this guy's trying to straw man him, but it's still not working. And I'm like, okay, that's curious. And then back in those days, we used to have Napster or Kazaa or something, and I downloaded this I became curious about religion. So I stumbled across this documentary. It's called Root of All Evil or something. And I watched that. And again, Richard Dawkins, and I see this sweet old man, very polite. He's saying things that are actually making sense, but he's so rude. How can he say these things? But again, in my mind, I'm like, it makes more sense what you're saying, though. So then I think YouTube was new at that time, 2004, 5, and then I looked him up, and then I think God Delusion came out in those days as well, and I read that. I consumed the whole book in like 3 days or something, and I read it again, and I was like, okay, now I had these questions in my mind. Like, for example, who created everything? Who created God? And then you go into all these arguments. So all of a sudden, they started becoming, my arguments or my questions started becoming more, started making more sense. And then I went into these these debates. And I became aware of these Sam Harris and Hitchens and all these guys. And I think over the next couple of years, I think I was convinced that this is all a hoax. And even though the funny point is, I still wasn't aware of most of Islam. I still didn't know at that point the comical mistakes, scientific mistakes that are made in the Quran or Islamic theology, or the abhorrent moral teachings that are in Islam. I didn't even know about the sex slavery part or Aisha's age at that point. So I became an atheist from Western point of view before I became aware. So, but now out of curiosity, in those 2 years, now I started learning about Islam. Then I started reading the Quran. I read the Quran at that time with translation. So yeah, I think that was the start of how I started getting into the doubt phase. You see, it actually, because it happened a long time ago, like unlike a lot of other activists, because it was fresh and then just came out as atheists, and a lot of these, some people I know, they can actually put a date on when they became an atheist. I can't do that because I think in those 2 years, from 2005 to 7, or maybe 2006 to 7, so, I could get the order wrong, but all of these things were happening at the same time. And so I wasn't attracted to any other religion because I was learning these atheistic arguments from these Western Christian or ex-Christians or people who are coming from the Christian point of view. So God Delusion barely says anything about Islam. Sam Harris' book does do a little bit about it because it was in retaliation to what happened in 9/11, etc. But I hadn't read that book yet. I was more so listening to Sam Harris's debates and talks. But even they were coming more from Christian point of view. So I'm like, okay, well, Christianity is done, so that doesn't make any sense. And then I thought, okay, let's look into. Even though I was becoming an agnostic, I would call myself agnostic at that point, despite not knowing what Islam really has to offer. Then I read into Islam, and it's like, yeah, these are the same universal arguments that apply on all these religions. Whichever religion you pick, you just pick a name out of the hat, and same problems, the same cosmological arguments on all of these ones, they apply on every single superstitious belief, not just on God, but also other mythologies like the demons or ghost or fate or soul, and all of these things. They're all unfalsifiable, blind, tall claims. So I and that's when I looked into Islam a bit more. I was like, yeah, well, that's just as nonsensical as Christianity. So I was still not convinced. I think at the initial phase in those 2 years, I stepped short of calling myself an atheist, even though I was massively impressed and influenced by Dawkins and all these guys. I was still calling, okay, I'll keep myself open. I'll stay agnostic, even though I was fully aware of Dawkins' table, where it's not 50-50. It's just not right in the middle. So then I think I started living my life as an atheist, and then you need a moral code. So I needed a moral code, and then reason gives you moral code. And when you look into it, and I realized that when you look into every system around us, even in these so-called Islamic countries like Pakistan, for instance, reason is a big part of their morality and ethics and the legal jurisprudence. So I was like, okay, so reason is all there is. So we debate, we talk about it. Something, our morality evolves over time. If it makes sense, then it does. If it doesn't, then we can throw it away and we can deem it evil. So I called myself. Then I think by the end of that, in that phase, I think I became convinced that I'm an agnostic atheist. I can leave a little window open for there might be a God, but that God can't be the one that tells us that it's the sun that goes around the earth and not the earth that goes around the sun. And then I could then channel all my thoughts, all my doubts. I can put them down. And I think, and this is when later on when I wrote my book, which was reminiscent of what my thoughts were at that time. The three slam dunk arguments for me, or the criterion for me, was: is there any evidence for God? Is the morality depicted in Islam or any other religion good? Or are there any scientific mistakes in the Quran? Because there can't be. Creator of the universe can't make scientific mistakes, or he can't give us pathetic moral codes that we do get from these religious texts. And to begin with, there's no evidence for any God anyway. So those were the 3 points that just convinced me that there is no God, and if there is a God, it can't be the God of our religions. Islam is a religion of peace, right? I just see that as a propaganda statement. I mean, Islam is a pretty vast ideology that is a political ideology, and no political ideology can be free from violence, and no political ideology, even a Western secularist, libertarian, liberal, whichever form of political ideology you want to pick, none of those ideologies can claim to be peaceful per se, let alone these ancient ones like Islam or any other religious doctrine on the far right wing doctrine. So Islam is pretty clear in how to deal with dissidents, opponents, enemies, which you could trouble. You could argue that, okay, well, what is the alternative offering you? So we could say that, okay, well, there could be violence in that too. And this is why I think it's just a very lame, lazy term to call any ideology peaceful. And Islam, as I said, is not. It can't be. I mean, what kind of a peaceful ideology would tell you to chop off the hands and feet of dissidents, of people who don't agree with you, or basically kill those who don't agree with you? So it can't be. It's a very lazy term. I mean, it's a very desperate attempt of the apologists of this religion to call it a religion of peace, or most feminist religion, or these kind of terms that they throw in. Arguments against God. So we don't need to have arguments against God. We need to analyze arguments for God, because it's a positive assertion. So there has to be an argument for God. And to be honest, none of the arguments for the existence of God are convincing enough. I mean, one way to look at it, if you look at every single argument that they put forward in favor of God, if you look at it, if that God, let's say, didn't exist, just for the argument's sake, it would appear exactly how we see our universe around us. So, for example, the argument for creation, like everything, there has to be a first cause. It's an incomplete and it's a self-defeating argument, or the premise itself is self-defeating. If you claim that everything needs to be created, then you have to explain, how did the creator come about? This is probably the biggest argument that every religious apologist goes with. And then they go, well, you can't find it, you can't detect it because it's outside of the universe. Again, it's unfalsifiable. How do I know that? So there's no way that any argument that has ever been put forward is convincing enough, at least by the objective empirical standards that everything else that we come about in our lives, it's objective, and it can be measured empirically or even drawn logically. This one doesn't even work logically either. As I said, if you just purely look at it, who created everything, or you need a creator, you need the first cause. Well, where the first cause, how did that come about? The argument, the reason why I call myself agnostic atheist is, and sorry, the second part before we go into that is what I said earlier, that the creator of the universe can't make scientific mistakes. That's just, I mean, every theologian would agree with that too. So what they rely on, then they twist and turn the verses and they interpret it to the way it seems that it's not against the scientific principles. Or then there are other looser form as well, where they say, well, science hasn't gotten there yet, but no, science knows that's the earth that goes around the sun. Sun doesn't go around the earth. And then, so what they do, they reinterpret those verses and they say, well, that's not what it's saying. It's talking about the sun's orbit around the center of the Milky Way. No, it's got nothing to do with day and night. This is the actual context. So, or salt water and fresh water don't mix together, or sperm is created, forms between backbone and the ribs. And these are such rudimentary, silly, pathetic scientific mistakes that if they were written in any other book, any book other than your sacred religious book, you would literally throw it in the bin. But we don't do that. So as far as the religious God is concerned, I think you'll have similar problems with Christianity as well, with Trinity and virgin birth and all of those kind of things. So it can't be the God of our religions. Now what? Let's just say, for the argument's sake, we can't disprove the existence of God. We can't, even though we don't have to. But for the argument's sake, if you say, then it means if this God exists, and we've already established it can't be the God of our religions, then, and it does exist, well, who is he? Why hasn't he contacted us? Why hasn't he made an appearance or sent a book or any of those things that these religions claim that they have, which they're proven to be false? Well, then it means that maybe he doesn't want to contact us. So it's an irrelevant God. If he does exist, it's irrelevant, just like there could be aliens on some other planet, but they're irrelevant to us. To us, they're as good as non-existent. So that is the only God that is possibly out there. But because, as I said, it's irrelevant, it doesn't make any difference to us. And the other part that I think that if God did exist somehow, whichever God that is, that God would also not be eternal. It just or at least in its form that it is in at the moment, where it's all powerful, more powerful than a better designer than anyone can be, and because he's a designer of the whole complex universe. He also must have started from something simple, because if you go, why there's something rather than nothing? If there was something, then that something would not have started off from complicated being. It would have started off from a simpler being, and then it would have evolved into something more complex than the universe. That is more likely explanation than the one that's been given to us, again, from the religious point of view. Religious God is dead. It doesn't make any sense. So religions are archaic. They run on they run more on our biological instincts than on reason, for example, and also they leave the imprint of the time they were invented in. So throughout human history, women have been subjugated by men, and there is a good, strong biological reason behind that too. So men will go out, they'll hunt, they will expect their women to stay at home, look after the kids, and they'll come back. So translate that into a modern world. A man will go to his office, do construction work, drill a jackhammer or whatever, while women are supposed to be staying at home and looking after the babies. Although, because we live in a world now where we rely on maximizing human pleasure and human welfare, that you cannot just have 50% of the population living at home. Although it might still serve some purpose, which could be debated and argued upon, but as a society that we've created, we need everyone to be as productive as we can be, and as a result have nicer cars and bigger TVs and more comfortable houses. For that, we need to be productive, we need to work. But Islam or any other primitive ideology doesn't see that aspect. I mean, modern economics is just dead to Islam, and that's why you see ISIS and Taliban, and they're struggling with that. How to be able to compete with the rest of the world, which recognizes the other 50% of the population as equal citizen. And you can go out, you can work, you can be a lawyer or a doctor, and enjoy a huge salary, and then as a result have a good way of life and pay more taxes, and when taxes will translate into a bigger defense budget and better healthcare and better education for your next generation. So any form of government that is built upon the ideals that we learn from Islam, let's just say, it just cannot compete with that. And this is the reason why a majority of Islamic countries, if you remove oil, they don't have anything, and this is why they're concerned about stepping into the 21st century once oil runs out. You look at Saudi Arabia, you look at Dubai, and now you look into Qatar and all these other countries. They're trying to modernize their economy and not rely entirely on oil. UAE's probably been moving away from it for a long time. But so Islam is definitely not women friendly. So the claim that it is the most feminist religion, if your definition of feminism is to make babies and be a good husband obeying wife, then sure. And they make an argument, it's a bit more deeper than that, but the apologists make an argument that, okay, well, that is the biological purpose of a male and a female, which obviously can be argued on, and I'm quite open to the other ideas where birth rates falling down and could just be the decline of the human species, and people are making less babies, if any at all, and that's because we're too caught up with improving our lifestyles and living independent lives, and because there is a biological timeline even for men as well in a certain point, because men also become less interested in making babies after a certain age, and obviously women can hit menopause, and if they finish their PhD by the age of 32 or 33, it becomes harder to start a family at that point. And then it's a bit asking for a big sacrifice from females as well, to just, okay, you worked so hard, but don't pursue a career in that. Just put everything on hold and then make babies. So I understand that aspect as well. So that is challenging as well. But if you go the other way, then women lose everything. Then it's a big problem in Pakistan. In a country like Pakistan, for example, it's somewhat divided between modern world and Islamic values. So people do want to educate the girls, and they want them to be doctors and then engineers and then other jobs. So a lot of girls end up becoming doctors, but they never practice. As soon as they become doctors, they come out, everyone wants a wife, educated, preferably doctor, but what do they want to do with them? Stay at home, make babies. So a lot of the potential gets wasted there. So it's I think there has to be a balance somewhere in between, but I would definitely go the liberal way, where women at least have a choice. If they do their PhD, they can make up their mind whether they want to put their career on hold, make babies, start a family, and go that way, or just remove the choice from them and say, well, sorry, your purpose is to make babies, so why do you want to become a doctor? Why do you want to go to university? It's just useless. So in that case, they don't have a choice. I would rather give them a choice and then decide for themselves. Yeah, purpose of life is it never really troubled me as much. Like, I mean, I obviously question that part, but again, it's like for some people, different thing hits them harder than others, and in my activism, like I've had, I don't know, over 1,000 testimonies where people say that they've left Islam, and then initially they go through this phase, and I still insist on saying that it's a phase, because the same very people after some time become quite content with their lives. They find a new purpose to start a family. They get busy with other things, and they come to realization that this is all there is, so we better maximize it. But for some people, initially, it really troubles them when they realize, oh, there's no heaven or hell after this. There's no, why do I need to do whatever I'm doing? Why do I need to wake up or whatever? So, but when they come out of that, when they realize that, okay, well, this is all there is, you're not going to jump out of the window because it's going to hurt, and that will end everything. So because you can enjoy other pleasures in life, in life as well, and then you can find other little purposes. And I think people do come out of that. In my case, I also went. I wouldn't say I went through that phase. I questioned it. Where I had the same problem. I was like, okay, so what's the point? I mean, it's kind of like waking up from deep sleep, and you wake up all of a sudden, and then you were having this wonderful dream where you're a millionaire, or you're married to most beautiful woman or whoever you have a crush on, and then all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, oh no, hang on, that I never said hello to that girl, or I never got that job. So it hits you at that point, and you hit despair at that point maybe. But then as the day goes along, and then you wake up and you come to your senses, and you're like, okay, well, I got to work hard for it, or I got to do whatever. I still got to go to work, or I still got to go to my university or whatever. So that's that phase, I think, in most people's life. So I probably had that maybe where I thought about it, but then I came to terms with it very, very quickly, because I also fell in love after that, and I got on with it. I found a job which I liked at that point. I traveled the world, and then I was living my life really well, and I was never troubled by that. I was never troubled by any of that aspect. But then I stepped into activism some 10 years later, which was accidental. It wasn't something that I was trying to fill a void or anything. So and again, now there's a different purpose in the way I look at it. I feel like inspiring other people to become activists as well, and that's the purpose for now that I'm enjoying a lot. I don't know how I would feel in 5 years' time. So purpose is something that we can always find, and there's no singular purpose of life. Some people you look into find great joy in helping homeless people, or helping animals, or doing some sort of social work, or they're just happy doing a 9-to-5 job. Although I find it very hard, but some people do enjoy that. I'm saving lives. If you ask a doctor, they're like, I love my job. I'm saving lives every day. If you're a nurse, all these things, you can find those purpose. But again, purpose doesn't have to be singular. You are allowed to change your career, change your direction, find a new purpose. And it happens. I think we should learn something from women on that, because, as I said, like a young woman could be very ambitious about a career, and she can be like, okay, I want to be a doctor or whatever, I want to be a sports star or something. But then she comes at a point, and every woman has to go through this at the age of 30, 32, whenever she decides to have a family. She puts everything on hold, and now all of a sudden there's a new purpose. I've got this baby, I'm going to raise him, or her. So why can't everyone else think that? Or especially men in that case, why can't we think that way? So it's not as troubling as some people find it, but obviously, again, it's just different people's way of thinking, and we can only reason with it. And I don't think it's that hard to find purpose. Yeah, it's like the purpose question, which is, again, I don't find it that hard to answer or to come to terms with it. Where, see, when we compare everything with religion, the moment we go past faith part, which every religion requires faith, which is not objective, which is a demand more so, and this is why once people lose faith, everything falls like a house of cards for them. Nothing makes sense anymore, because whatever morality we get from whichever religion you follow, it shows the reasoning of that time it was invented in. So to overcome that, they just say, well, there is this authority that you have faith in, that it exists, and you have to have faith that whatever comes out of it is for your own good. It's the absolute good. So you have to have that in order to believe that morality is objective. In that case, I would say that it does become objective. But the problem again remains that if you've gone past that, if your faith is shattered, then it doesn't mean anything. It's like, I mean, people look up to the kids. Let's just say the father. They go like, my father is a good man. He has his my best interests in his heart. He can never wrong me, whatever. But the moment that faith is shattered, let's just say your father does something, now you can't take anything that he tells you, or now you can't take it on blind face value. You would always be questioning that. So religion requires faith in order for you to believe that the morality is objective. So at the end of the day, this claim, I find that inherently false and terribly flawed. The morality coming from religion is objective. Because then you again have to have problem with which God to follow. I mean, why don't we go with Hindu model of morality, that cow is your mother, whichever religion you pick, they all claim that. So for you to believe that morality is objective, you have to have blind faith in your favorite God. What's the alternative? We look at the alternative, that everything that we look at around us, our constitutions, our legal jurisprudence, everything is built on this wonderful process of debates, reasoning, rationality. We don't know, for example, I say, how are we going to deal with, what does religion say about how to deal with robots who are conscious and self-aware? Religions say nothing. Islam doesn't even say whether kangaroos are halal or not. You need ijtihad for that, which in definition is something that is reason-based morality. Yes, they will reason from it that, okay, you can have, it's not a carnivorous animal, so it's kind of a deer, so deer is halal, therefore, so you need reasoning for that. Quran itself doesn't say anything about it. Islam doesn't, they didn't even know whether kangaroos existed or not. So how are we going to deal with robots? That's going to be harder for them. They're going to go into more vaguer definition that, okay, well, you shouldn't hurt anyone, even though that's terribly conflicted, because you do hurt so many other people in according to Islamic theology. You have to hurt a homosexual, you have to discipline a wife or whatever. So hurting is not really the central part. So it needs to be more specific. So a robot, how are we going to deal with it if it becomes self-aware? It can suffer. We're going to have the 22nd century, or whenever this dream becomes a reality, we're going to have debates. Then we're going to find new reasons. We're going to learn new facts, and then based on that, we're going to legislate on that. Maybe you shouldn't hit your robot or break its arm. And so that is the alternative, and that is the only alternative that everything will look around us. How fast we should drive in a school zone. I remember in Australia when we started we had a couple of accidents where people were going 50 kilometers an hour and they killed a couple of kids in school zones. So they debated about it, and they said, well, okay, the school zone speed limit is 40 kilometers from now on. And some people joked about it too, like, okay, what if there's another accident that happens? You're going to reduce it to 30, or then maybe just don't have any cars there at all. All of that is going to evolve in light of better reasoning, more facts, and then we're going to debate about it. There is nothing that comes objectively from anywhere, because that would require faith, and it's a dead end. It's a dead end. You would need, even Islamic jurisprudence, you need ijtihad, which basically means that have a debate and reason. So, like the question of purpose, morality, it's just an illusion that morality is objective. Once, however, we are convinced that there is a God and this is exactly what he wants, then you could say, okay, this is objective, but then you would also have to go into, where's God deciding what's good and bad? If he's deciding between good and bad, then it means good and bad exist independently. So why do we need the middleman like God? Why can't we use our own reasoning to find out? So it's a very complex one, and I've got a debate coming up with Daniel Kikachu. I'm gonna talk more in detail about it then. If you watch it, then yeah, do check that out, debate. Again, it's another one where Prophet Muhammad is supposed to be presented to us as the best man of all times, as the best role model, and we believe in that when we grow up. Again, as I said, we're not told how many, if Zainab was Prophet's adopted son's wife, or who was Maria Kiptia, or how Prophet Muhammad got to know her more intimately, or what was the age of Aisha, who was Javeria or Safiya. I would say quite confidently 90% of Pakistanis don't know that. And for me, the concept of sex slavery, and this is when my faith was almost shattered, that's when I found out about sex slavery, because this was something that I could never imagine. Because in Pakistan, for example, Pakistan is a sexually very conservative country. You are told that you're not even, sex is bad, you're not supposed to look at anyone. And we have some Indian influence as well, that you're only meant to be married once, you're only meant to have one wife, and that's it. So we're told that despite of young teenagers' instincts, your sexuality is suppressed. So we go, okay, maybe that's what Islam is, even though it's not. So when you come to realization, whoa, these guys were living a pretty colorful life. Prophet was given special discount that he can have as many wives as he wants, but normal Muslims can only have 4. But hey, even that's way more than what our uncles or our father or all the men around me got to enjoy. They just got to, it was like a toss of a coin. Okay, but you told to marry this woman, like her? No? Okay, well, that's it. Job's done. You have to stay with her. But on top of that, you can invade a neighboring tribe, kill their men, and you can take their wives. You don't even have to marry them. You can just put them in a dungeon downstairs, like Joseph Fritzl, and you can just have sex with them to your heart's content. I was like, how is this moral? And I in my Urdu streams and my English streams as well, but more so in my Urdu streams, I open my channel up for ordinary people to call in, and I've spoken with probably 1,000 plus Muslims since then. I always throw this part in because for Pakistan specific, this is a very touchy point for them. Yes, they got to get over the amputation of hands or stoning of adulterers. They get over, Prophet had so many wives. They get over that part. But sex slavery or women's statement is half, and you can beat your wife. They get over all of that, even though they're troubling. But they get over all of that. But what they can't get over is, let me invade your tribe. Let Indians invade us and kill all our men and take your sister and your mother and your daughters as sex slaves. And it's so inherently evil that nobody can buy that. This is why when I run into Salafis and I put that forward in front of them, they just shrug their shoulders. Yeah, so what? And then they give some really bad justifications for it, like, okay, back in the day it was alright or whatever, but then they're shooting themselves in the foot because this moral code is supposed to be eternal and it's objective, right? What's objectively true now, how can it be objectively good now? How can it be objectively bad later on or in this day and age? So that part says a lot about the character of Prophet. There are cases where women came to Muhammad, complained about men their husbands who beat them up. He never punished them. Omar once said that Caliph Omar, he was one guy who visited him, and this is where the source of the hadith comes, that he got up in the middle of the night. Omar was beating the hell out of his wife, and he said, well, don't beat your wife that badly. And he says, well, Prophet Muhammad told me, never ask a man why he's beating his wife. Pray witr in your night prayers. And then third, I forgot. so because he knew that Muhammad used to do things in 3. So he forgot the third one. So either Umar was lying or Muhammad was lying. Whatever the case might be, Prophet Muhammad endorsed wife beating. He never actually categorically prohibited it, like he prohibited gambling or consuming alcohol, etc., but he never prohibited it. He did say in some points that, okay, how can you beat your wife like you beat your slaves? So he's showing a disdain for beating your wife so severely, but he's not saying that you shouldn't hit your wife. But so that says a lot about a man. I mean, why do we have to go 1400 years ago? Even now, primitive men will beat their wives. The people who can't control their emotions, they can get angry and they can start beating their wives, and that's the problem everywhere. So whoever is a wife beater in our day and age, no decent person can say, oh, he's a decent guy. No one would say that, oh, he's a good mate, but he beats his wife, which is fine. Nobody does that. How can we ignore that with Muhammad? So Muhammad character, if you just look at his personal life, and I'm not even going into war crimes that he committed, he is far from it. So the ISIS and Taliban, and I know I get in trouble every now and then, and I get divided in that too, because I do understand there are genuinely people out there who genuinely believe that Islam can be interpreted in a different way. But if I look at it, if I literally look at the Islamic theology, Islamic texts, Quran and the Hadith and even the fiqh, if I literally look at it, ISIS is the closest form of Islam, of Muhammad's Islam, not the 20th century Yasir Qadhi or maybe Shabir Ali's Islam, maybe not that, or Javed Ghamdi, not those ones. ISIS is the closest. Taliban of the 90s were the second closest, but they were the closest at that time because ISIS came later. But now, even Taliban, what we're learning now, they are also trying to modernize themselves. The same women will be allowed in the governance. Girls are allowed to be taught. Women would be allowed to go out. I think that I think they're divided whether they would be allowed to go out unaccompanied or not. So that says that even hardliners like Taliban as well know that we just cannot adopt Muhammad's Islam. ISIS, people say that about all the time. What is ISIS? What did ISIS do that either Muhammad did not sanction it or did it himself? There's nothing. There are rawayas as well, where traditions as well, where, albeit some people argue and they say, well, they're weak rawayats, where Muhammad or ordered homosexuals to be thrown off rooftops. That's what ISIS was doing. The others are just quite other hudud punishments are just set in stone anyway, so there's no disagreement on that. Take capturing sex slaves like Yazidi girls. That's exactly what Islam did. But the fact that most Muslims are outraged by that and they say that no, ISIS are not the real Islam. Mehdi Hassan just tweeted a couple of days ago. He said, please don't call Taliban, even this Taliban, who are far better than the 90s Taliban, seemingly, what it appears is still too early to call, but if you go by the words, they're better than what they were in the 90s. Mehdi Hassan tweeted and he said, please don't call, to my fellow journalists, please don't call Taliban Islamic. But these guys, how can they just turn it off? Mehdi Hassan is a very smart guy. How can they turn it off? If you just look at the hadiths and the seerah of the Prophet and the Quran itself, this is the closest form of Muhammad's Islam. As I said, Muhammad's Islam, if you go literally, this is what it is. If you ignore all these other, every century had a new Islamic cleric who just gave a new idea and he just interpreted it in his own way. When the Quran itself says that it's not supposed to be, it is supposed to be taken literally. Quran is the easiest book, and in Quran, Allah wrote that in a way that every person can understand it. Yet we're still discovering black holes in the Quran now. So that's quite a book. But if you take it on face value, read it literally, ISIS is the closest, Taliban the second closest. Right, so my book, I actually started writing it in 2013, but then I just lost interest. So there were some aspects in my book. I think I had written probably about 50, 60 pages in 2013, I think it was 2013, because I remember it was just before Pakistani election and I was hoping Imran Khan would come to power. So probably 2012, but then I just lost interest. And then there was a crackdown, and I got on with my life, with my job, and I was traveling and whatever. I was just living my life, as I like to call the life of an infidel or murtad, of debauchery and whatever they like to throw at us. No, there's no debauchery though. I was just happily partnered with one woman. So I and then there was a crackdown on atheists in Pakistan, just out of the blue. One of the atheists was killed. Supposedly he was an atheist, but we don't know. Obviously he was killed, so we can't ask him that, in his university campus. So that's when I started doing my activism. And then I was like, okay, the next step is I have to channel my thoughts. I have to just put it in writing, whatever happens to me. I was actually willing to be martyred in the world of atheism at that point, although I would have taken all precautions, because I'm not going to get 72 girls in the afterlife. So so that was my inspiration, and I wanted to put it in writing, just on the record. If anyone wants to dive deep into my way of thinking, or which is not really my way of thinking, which is just borrowed from everyone else. It was just my thoughts. So that was the reason I wanted to put it there, so anyone can go out and get it and read it. So that was the inspiration to write the book. I think we now just yesterday I found out a Pakistani academic wrote a rebuttal to it. So I'm interested to see what that is. There was another one who wrote it before, wrote a rebuttal to it, like a little booklet in response to my book. I didn't get to read it because the person didn't impress me at all. Like it was really bad. But I'm hoping this one might be a good rebuttal. Richard Dawkins recently tweeted about it. I met him maybe a month or so ago, and I gave him my signed copy of my book to him. So yeah, he read it and he tweeted about it. He really liked it. So yeah, those things are good. I mean, I if I think about it now, if I would write something different, I would probably write. I stand by most of it. There was a couple of statistical errors that I made, which I've explained in a video that what they were, and it was just an honest mistake. But 99% of it, I stand by it. And even this is what it's been nearly 3 years later. It's still the same, and it's there. I think you can get it on Amazon and all your favorite bookstores. There's an audiobook as well. So yeah, I think it's a good read. Right, so like as I said earlier, like as an activist, what people like me like to see is obviously, I've always said it, we've got nothing to lose. Religion is standing on such shaky ground that even if you just push it a little bit, it can wither away. It can crumble very quickly. And this is why they say faith is like a thin, I think it's just an Urdu saying or something, that faith is like a thread, which is, which can be broken very easily, but then your thread's supposed to be like a string which never breaks. It's thin, but you can never, but which is all obviously word salad, because it is like a thread where any kind of doubt, all we have to do is put a tiny bit of seed of doubt. Tiny bit, which I believe that already exists in the back of their minds. Like, for example, a 9-year-old kid like me asking, well, who created everything? It's a curious question. Yes, the answer could be complicated, but the question itself is very curious. Well, why is sky blue? Well, where is the rainbow? Is there a solid object or something? So these questions arise at a very young mind, but we don't get the answers, and nobody, even adults, don't have these answers. Not the rainbow sky part, but who created everything. So that, I think, is the fundamental foundation. That's the starting point of a thinking mind, and that doubt remains with you throughout your life. Although in those adolescent years, habits can form. You can be convinced by, yep, there's a God. My God is the favorite one. This is the one, the real one, and we got to do this and this and this. And we tend to see people as they get older, 40s, 50s, it becomes impossible for them to shake off their belief, and it's not even beneficial for them, because they're not going to go out and they're not going to party. They're settled in their lives, and they're like, even if they have doubts, they're not going to. It's a zero-sum game for them. But for younger people, like in their teens and 20s, now the whole life is ahead of them. And now at that point, when we plant this tiny seed of doubt, and then you just grab your popcorns and just enjoy the show, because they're going to do that for you. And again, it's not something for me per se, or for people like us. It's for your own good, in a way that you can maximize your potential and live a good life. So that's what I want to see as an activist. And as I said earlier, that I am yet to see an atheist, an educated atheist. There's one example, I forgot his name, this Bangladeshi activist, but again, most people are not convinced whether he really did revert back to Islam or not. But whatever the reason might be, it'd be few and far between. But there are not many atheists who, once they become aware of these arguments, they go back to Islam. But on the other hand, there are literally thousands of Muslims losing their faith every day. Why? I mean, and when you drill it down, when you speak to them, as many as you can, they tell you not one thing, or they can't even put a date on what really caused that, which person really influenced them the most. It's a collective effort, and and let it happen. So I would say that to doubting Muslims, if you are a doubting Muslim already, it's pretty much game over. It's just a matter of you just trying to hold on to something for various reasons that we talked about earlier. They get troubled by purpose, they get troubled by morality, they get troubled by those, and that's why they're like, okay, maybe life is simpler that way. It's like taking the red pill or not. It's like, should I just stay in the matrix or actually come out? Truth might be a lot harsher, but once you come to terms with that truth, I think it becomes a lot easier, and your life becomes more rewarding once you realize that. You're not going to have to waste your life praying 5 times a day, looking hideous with a really thick beard, or wearing a black bag over your head, or looking funny with your trousers worn so above your ankles. So these are just very superficial things, but they matter though. They really do matter. You can go to a pub, you can talk to your friends, and enjoy a cool beverage or something. So life becomes a lot better. Yes, it's not perfect. There would still be issues there as well. But why not deal with real issues than imaginary ones? Because you still have issues. You still, when you're not finding a job, and you did everything right, and then you ask your God, hey God, please give me this job, or please, give me these grades, and that doesn't happen. You still have that issue. You still deal with that. So why not deal with real issues? So I would say if you're doubting, then the game is already over. It's just a matter of when you're going to come to terms with it.